Okay, let this function as a review for exam one for Intro to Philosophy. We're in the summer now, but this could be for the intersession as well. So this is a review for exam one, and I think the questions are randomized, so I'm just going to go through the true or false. What I'm looking for in the essay is something just about comparing Nietzsche and Plato in terms of the objectivity of truth and moral values. You know, Nietzsche's view is that there is no moral values. Plato's is that there is. Now, if Nietzsche's right, there are implications for this, including the idea that nothing's good or evil, that there's no right or wrong, that nothing's true, right? If Nietzsche's right, then everything's false, including the idea that everything's false. That would be false too. Whereas Plato leaves room for morality, truth, etc. God. Okay, but I'm just going to go through the true or false here. For Nietzsche, if humans possess a why, they can endure any how, and thus the death of God as the collapse of the highest value in Western culture presents modern humans with a peculiar crisis of meaning, since the why no longer finds any answer. Right, so Nietzsche's famous for saying if we have a why, we can endure any how. That is, if we have a purpose, we can suffer. But with the death of God, we no longer have a purpose. Our lives are losing hope and meaning, and it makes Western culture, it makes this world unbearable to a certain degree. In the end, Nietzsche's philosophy in particular, his philosophic conception of the eternal return of the same, argues for the value of affirming life and overcoming revenge such that I can say without resentment, what does not kill me makes me stronger. Remember, yes, for Nietzsche, the eternal return, Nietzsche's whole philosophy, if you were to summarize it in a nutshell, it's the overcoming of resentment, that human beings overcome revenge. This is for me the highest hope in a rainbow after long storms, he says in Zarathustra. What does not kill me makes me stronger. Nietzsche's whole philosophy is that Western culture is permeated with a victim mentality, with an undeserved sense of, I shouldn't say undeserved sense, but pathological sense of resentment because we feel oppressed, we feel victimized. And so his whole philosophy is about getting out of this mode by overcoming resentment. How do you do that? You imagine the world on repeat over and over and over again, and then you can affirm life, say what does not kill me makes me stronger, and overcome revenge. So very good. There's also a short answer, briefly explain Plato's theory of forms. Remember, Plato's theory of forms are extramental, intelligible objects that exist beyond space and time. So he's talking about moral objects, mathematical objects. Truth in general, for Plato, exists out there somewhere, non-spatially and non-temporally, but in another metaphysical or metataphysical world, an intelligible, supersensible world. So it's a sort of philosophic conception of heaven versus earth. And remember, he thinks like mathematical formulas that have to do with beauty and such also exist independently of our minds. Now, it sounds ridiculous at first, but how do you account for what mathematicians are doing? How do you account for morality if it doesn't exist somewhere? Even famous physicists now, I don't know if I've linked the video or not, say that cosmologists, that the laws of physics exist beyond the world, or they have existence before the world's inception, which is very interesting. That's how the universe could have come into being out of nothing, if and only if the laws of quantum mechanics were there prior. Okay, back to true or false. Nietzsche seeks through his method of the hermeneutics of suspicion, which is just, hermeneutics just means interpretation, and suspicious, so a suspicious interpretation, to unearth the conditions for the possibility of, or to unearth the conditions of power behind Western culture and its values. That is Nietzsche's hermeneutics, or his method. Nietzsche, an atheist by instinct, argues in favor of a Darwinian worldview where power reigns over reason, which leads Nietzsche inevitably to argue in favor of objective morality, purpose, and truth in the world. Well, that can't be right because Nietzsche argues that power reigns over reason, and so there's no objectivity to anything, no objectivity to morality, purpose, and truth. No, it's all subjective or perspectival or relative, not objective. Okay, so the truth is not out there for Nietzsche, which brings us to this next question. There is no truth. Now remember, I'm asking this not just for Nietzsche, but for all of us. Think about this. If you think there is no truth, let's say you personally believe, I don't believe anything is true, let's say you think that, then that can't be true. It has to be false because you've just denied that there is truth. So there is no truth has to be false for those who believe it and those who disagree with it. I think there is truth, but I still think, therefore, that there is no truth is false. If you think there is no truth, that's false too, because everything would be false, including the saying that there is no truth. Just like the idea that everything is a perspective. That's not true. That's just a perspective. Everything is relative. Everything is based on power. That's not true. It's relative. And that's not true. It's just a power perspective. Okay. For Nietzsche, the ethic of concern for victims originates in the resentment of what he calls slave morality or the morality of the weak. Yes, this is Nietzsche's critique of Western culture. that slave morality, or that this ethic that we hold so dear to us called social justice, really is the result of losers or weak people failing to win, I guess, at the power game of life. For Nietzsche, the Superman, or the Übermensch, or the meta-human, as a creator of value, is nevertheless still tethered to revenge and resentment. No, remember, the Übermensch is the one who is free from revenge and resentment, such that the Übermensch, he or she, can unconditionally affirm life. And you can't affirm life. You can only deny life if you're full of resentment. Okay? Plato believed in the forms, and thus the form of the beautiful. Therefore, he thought that beauty was relative and in the eye of the beholder. No, believing in the forms means that you think beauty is out there. Now, of course, there can be disagreements about what's beautiful, or people can have different senses of taste, but if something is beautiful, Plato thinks, it's a fact. It's an objective, metaphysical fact. So beauty actually has objective status, so it's not relative. It's not in the eye of the beholder. Relativism, the philosophic position most closely associated with Plato and Nietzsche, remember, Plato is not a relativist, Nietzsche is a relativist, argues that there are indeed objective values and truths. Well, relativism is the idea that there are no objective values and truths. Everything is relative or subjective. For Nietzsche, since there is no truth, the statement, there is no truth, is true. No, remember, for Nietzsche, everything is false, including his own philosophy, including the statement, there is no truth. That's false too, because everything is false, because there's no truth. Nietzsche, although an atheist, was not a nihilist, since he believed you can put meaning onto the world. Nietzsche was an atheist, a relativist, and a nihilist. Just because he thought you can put meaning onto the world doesn't mean he actually thinks there is meaning. He still thinks there is no purpose to existence. So he is, in fact, a metaphysical nihilist. Now, there are some who say Nietzsche isn't a nihilist because he's critiquing a certain form of nihilism. That's true. But in this question, I'm asking, and in the way we've been talking about Nietzsche, Nietzsche is an atheist and a nihilist since he doesn't believe in any objective purpose to existence. So Nietzsche is a nihilist. Platonism is a philosophical system of metaphysics, metaphysica, which affirms the existence of another world where objective intellectual objects exist. Seems pretty straightforward. Plato believed in the forms, he believed in metaphysics, he believed in another world where objective intellectual objects exist. He wasn't a relativist. So this next question, Plato was a relativist since he believed in the forms. No, the forms are his counter to relativism. Okay, how is it that people have so many different moral opinions and it all seems relative? Well, Plato thinks the only way to arbitrate that is to say that justice exists in some other world, for example. And then, I have another short answer question. What is the main difference between Nietzsche's philosophy and Plato's philosophy with regard to truth? Well, Plato thinks truth is objective. Nietzsche thinks it's subjective. Plato believes in forms, and he thinks you can arbitrate via rational dialogue and logic and reason what's true and what's false if it's not empirical. Great. Okay. Hope that suffices as a review.